processors. There we go. With food distribution partners and our local food networks, really, again, to make sure we're distributing fresh and nutritious foods to our underserved communities. And we have some great partners on the call, like Sarah mentioned, to really talk and highlight about that. Next, I just wanted to highlight on building our farm to food access supply chains. So it's really developing those partnerships to experience access to markets. So we're taking our Wisconsin producers, connecting them with community organizations, distributors, and then making that connection to our food security partners. For example, like Hunger Task Force on the call today. Our goal is 80% sourced from socially disadvantaged and historically underserved producers from the USDA. So this year, 2024, we have 123 producers total in the program. And then Sarah's going to highlight the statistics on our meat producers next. So thank you.
Thanks, Katie. So, right, last year, the first year of LFPA, we had 8 farmers in the program producing lamb and goat. They produced 1,762 pounds of meat that we sent to over 10 food banks, and we paid farmers $25,000, almost $250, which is a nice chunk of change, and it was really impactful to those farmers, I'm sure. But this year, just 2 months into the program, we've already purchased, as of just today, 80% of what we purchased in all of 2023. So I think it's a pretty strong indication of where this market is going and the impact that LFPA is having on our farmers. So we also have with us tonight Jeff Swenson from DebtCap, the livestock specialist there. He brought us some really interesting information for those of us who are working on developing those relationships direct to our consumers or direct to a market, and really want to take this on and create a product for a specific community. Jeff, do you want to talk about what you've got with us here?
Sure. There's 2 links here. One would be a directory of Wisconsin inspected or DATCAP inspected meat processors. The other is federally inspected meat processing. I'll cover this quickly, and if there's questions, feel free to ask, because I think that this will be review for a lot of people. When you go to the Wisconsin meat processors list, there will be 2 types of meat processors. There will be custom exempt and official meat establishments. To have sheep and goats processed for sale, you would need to use one of the official establishments. Those custom exempt, establishments are, you'd get the meat back that is stamped not for sale. So it's really meant for people that own the animal, want to use the meat for their own use. So that's custom exempt. And then the federally inspected list are meat establishments that are in Wisconsin that are inspected by the USDA Food Safety Inspection Service. In order to sell meat across state lines, you would need to be federally inspected. Or there is a caveat, and I'd be happy to answer questions about it or talk to any of you later, but Wisconsin is one of the few states that allows cooperative interstate shipment. So those state inspected meat processors are approved by the USDA to ship meat across state lines, but they still are inspected by Wisconsin. That meat your meat that would be crossing state lines, entering interstate commerce, would have the federal stamp of inspection on it. So to establish a relationship with a processor, find one in your area, either state inspected. You can sell into food service with a state inspected establishment. That's not a problem. You just couldn't sell meat into Illinois, Minnesota, or any other state.
Thanks, Jeff. I do appreciate that, and I'm glad you can stick around. I'm sure there will be questions on this after we're done. So thanks a lot. Okay, and next joining us is Stephanie Bowers. She runs Glorious Goat Ranch and Goats on the Go, a browsing operation. And so this is her second year in the LFPA program, and Stephanie's here to share some of her adventures in goat farming. And Stephanie, if you want to go ahead and tell us what you've been up to and what the LFPA has done for you.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so I just started sharing my screen so you guys can learn a little bit about us. So, I wanted to start out with just a little bit about what the Glorious Goat Ranch is. So it's kind of a hobby / 4-H project gone wild. We started about 3 years ago with a couple of goats, and it grew from there, and now we have a lot more. So what happened is before we dove big into goat farming, I worked in the nonprofit world with a lot of people with various cultural backgrounds that were new to the United States. And one of the things that really struck me was the ability or the need for culturally appropriate food. So when we started with our goat project, it just kind of grew. And so we finally came up with our official purpose, which is to provide culturally appropriate, best-in-class products utilizing ecologically beneficial practices and ideals from regenerative grazing. And then also, because we are a business, we do need to provide for our family. So that's the super high level purpose of our farm. So as we go and grow, we're trying to figure out how to do that. And goats happen to be a really good niche for us. Let me see. And so it all starts with our family. So this is my crazy family. We've been dairy farming for 3 decades, and our cows actually just left today. So it's a bit of a thing here. So with our family, we're trying to figure out how we can expand our goat operation to, that life after cows and provide culturally appropriate food to our friends around the area. So that's where the LFP program has been really helpful. So this is our herd. So part of what we do is I like the concept of stacking enterprises. So we started with goats and we're like, well, what can you do with goats? Obviously, they're delicious. Fence jumpers make delicious gyros. Just I'll put that out there. And so we do rotational grazing with our goats, and we actually do invasive species management. So people hire us to bring our goats to their properties to handle various invasive species. Like it could be buckthorn is a really big one. This picture is from a park where we're doing a reed canary grass removal project, trying to restore a native prairie where goats are a great option for that. And we also have some sheep mixed in there too. So as we started with this, we knew that with goats, they're a great culturally appropriate source of food, but how do you get them processed? Because on-farm processing is not something we are able to do for a variety of reasons, and trying to figure out where to go and what to do. And we finally found a local processor that can process our goats and actually process them halal as well. And it took us a couple of years to figure that out. Prior to that, and even still, we are sending animals through some equity auctions, which has been really nice. And the LFPA program has been really great as well to help us work through some of the, tricks and hiccups as you go from literally just sending your animals straight to equity, and then they handle all of, you sell your animal and then whatever happens to it, happens to it. But as we switch over to like handling more of that process ourselves, working with a local processor, developing those relationships, there's a huge time investment there. So that's something to consider too, as you're looking at your different business models, is what does it mean? What is best? Do you want to sell, whole animals through equity, or do you want to start looking at other options of processing through a local processor? So we're kind of learning how that all works with the LFPA program, which has been very impactful for us and our small business. Let's see. And then, so this is just another example of our enterprises, splitting out our enterprises. We have the targeted grazing, and that we do that. We're branded under Goats on the Go Green Bay. So it's been quite a journey learning about marketing our goats from the meat side. I think one of the biggest things that has been a challenge and people need to think about is the amount of time it takes to build the relationships with your processors and the people who are going to be consuming your meat. I know one big learning curve for us, and I've talked to other producers that are, are similar size and scale too, is the economics of it. Like, you might be able to sell an animal, or you will be able to, that value add when you sell your meat through, but then there's the accounts receivable portion. Like, when you sell animals with equity, you're going to get a check within 7 days. When you're selling meat, you suddenly have accounts receivable, which just really adds a whole fun part to your program. So I would just say, think about that. I'm super grateful for the LFPA program, and really excited to work with our local food pantries as well to get some culturally appropriate protein back in our diets. I'm happy to answer any questions after the webinar, and I'll toss it back to you, Sarah.
Thank you, Stephanie. That is so helpful. And it's really exciting to hear, the way you've fearlessly explored all the possible revenue streams that are out there. So I'm really glad you could be a part of this and stick around and share your wisdom with us afterwards. And so then nextly, we have Kyle Buehner from Hunger Task Force. So he's the public facing side of the LFPA, and they've been doing such a very good job getting this food into the hands of the people that dearly want it. And he has some insights to share with us now. So Kyle, you want to take it away?
Yes, thank you, Sarah. Thank you for having me on today.
Yeah.
As Sarah mentioned, my name is Kyle Buehner. I'm the Food Procurement Manager here at Hunger Task Force. We're a nonprofit food bank in Milwaukee. We serve 66 local food pantries, meal sites, and shelters free of charge every single month. And part of our mission has always been that we believe everyone has a right to healthy food obtained with dignity. And part of that dignity aspect is making sure we're providing culturally appropriate foods that are appropriate based on whether it's dietary preference, religion, different cultures, anything like that. We're always striving to try to make sure we are meeting the community where they are at. But at the same time, that's always a challenge because Milwaukee is a very diverse community, and we serve, like I mentioned, those 66 pantries throughout the greater Milwaukee area, and there's a wide-ranging needs throughout that network. We've seen kind of an increase over the past couple of years. Stephanie alluded to this as well, of an increase in need for halal foods. Many refugees from Afghanistan and that area started to resettle here a couple of years ago. And so we started to see an increase in some of those demands for those halal meats in particular. One thing that we did when that first happened was we began packing boxes of food just specifically for that community as they were kind of resettling, new to the area, new to the country, as a way to provide kind of as much of a culturally appropriate option as we could. So at that time, we did buy some halal meats that were, unfortunately, these weren't local. There were a lot of canned goods and things like that, but we tried to do as good as we could to kind of meet that community where they were at. Many of the pantries that we serve, they are always asking for more meat. Meat and protein is one of the most in-demand items. I would say in terms of some of the very specific ones like goat or lamb or halal or kosher foods, we don't necessarily get those requests from our pantries all the time. Even though they are serving those communities, they really look at us as providing the baseline of their food source. And then when they need very small specific things, they'll sometimes go out and source them themselves. So they don't always ask us for those items, but we also know they're always in need of those items. So anytime we get something like that, we know there is a home for it. That is the great thing about, one, this LFPA program, and two, the diverse network that we serve here in Milwaukee. Anytime we get something, whether it's fresh produce or any of the meats, we know that what pantries are interested in those items, where a good home will be, and there's always that demand there. As I mentioned before, meat in general is always one of the most popular and in-demand items at our pantries. And one of the big things that we always try to make sure of is that we are providing food that is also usable to them in just different pack sizes. We'll often get offers for people donating an entire cow or different things like that. But since we are not a processor, we have no way of getting that into the hands of the community. So we're always looking for things that are the right size for individuals, small to medium-sized families, or even larger families. But one of the bigger challenges sometimes for a lot of that community is, what do they have for freezer space? So it might be a huge, some huge piece of meat, but they just don't have the space to hold it. So we're always trying to make sure that we're talking to any producers or vendors that we work with on making sure that, once again, we're kind of meeting that community where they're at and what they're able to best utilize. Yeah, that's pretty much all that I had. I mean, we have been involved, as Sarah mentioned, in LFPA the last 2 years. And this year we're lucky enough to get a community partner grant. So we are kind of receiving LFPA from 2 different sources, one through Marble Seed and Wisconsin Food Hub. And then we also have our own grant that we are working directly with some Wisconsin farmers and food producers to provide a lot of culturally appropriate produce and also some proteins as well. So we're very, very grateful for this program and glad to be on here. And I think the one last thing that I just mentioned too, I'm happy to just offer myself up as a resource. As I mentioned, we're not necessarily buying all of these items all the time, but I also know pantries throughout the greater Milwaukee area and also throughout the state that often are looking for them. So please feel free to reach out if you have questions or anything like that. I can often find, what if it's not us, help finding a home somewhere else.
That's fantastic. Kyle, would you mind putting your contact info in the chat? And
yes, absolutely.
That'd be great. Well, I appreciate that. And please do stick around for questions later on.
Will do.
All right. And next we have Abdullah Hussaini. I'm so excited to hear everything he's got to tell us. Equity is such an important entity in the Midwest and all over Wisconsin specifically. And there's a lot of really helpful information for those of us really interested in taking our meat operations to the next level. So with that, Abdullah, can I turn this over to you, please?
Good evening, everybody. My name is Abdullah Hussaini. I work at Equity Livestock out of Baraboo, Wisconsin. You can go ahead to the next slide, Sarah. So just starting off, I wanted to go over some services Equity does offer. We do handle all classes of livestock. That's cattle, hogs, sheep, and goats. And we've got several different live auction facilities, as well as online auction services and private treaty services. We also have risk management division where producers can have contracts, whether that be farmer to farmer or farmer to packer. And then also some financing options through our lending division. Little overview about myself, Junior VP of Marketing in the Risk Management and Sheep and Calf Division. I got my degree in Ag Business from UW-Madison. Currently represent producers on Wisconsin Beef Council and American Sheep Industry Lamb Council. Sheep producer myself and reside in Mauston, Wisconsin. So I'm going to kind of boil this down from the get-go. We're going to focus kind of on 2 different aspects. We've been hearing that halal kosher verbiage quite a bit already. That term is kind of not necessarily a commercial term. That would be coined the non-traditional market, or in layman's term, ethnic markets. There's several markets within that. Halal and kosher do fall into that category. But when you compare the two, those are going to be the two main differences. Commercial markets are going to be stuff you see at McDonald's, your local grocery stores, something that's sitting on the shelf all the time and is available in the same fashion all over the country. Non-traditional markets are going to be a little bit different than that, and we'll go over the details. So some of the next points we're going to go over will be marketing methods. How do you sell your livestock? How it's processed? And then what are the different markets within, such as feeder, finished, and cull markets? And what are those buyers looking for? And what's the seasonality and any certifications that producers can obtain? So starting off with marketing methods, two main types. Obviously, Equity's got several auction facilities. This is a public sale facilitated by a third party. Animals are sold to the highest bidder. Very competitive setting. And the next would be a direct sale between a second party that's offering a direct bid, whether that be a dealer or even a contract. Difference being a contract's going to have more specs involved. You're going to see a little bit of a back end of it. Typically, those contracts are going to be for, I wouldn't say typically, but some of those contracts might be for harvested animals that they will pay you based on those carcass characteristics, versus direct dealer trade might be cash bid of live animals. This might look a little confusing to you, so let's go column by column. On the auction side, potential for greater return, minimum risk of payment, I'd say, as Stephanie kind of alluded to, we are certified and bonded through any auction facility, and that might not be the case when you're doing direct business. You might have some type of risk. We've had instances where producers might say, oh, we tried to sell something direct and their check bounced. What do we do? So there are instances where that does occur. Auctions typically are going to be a little bit more competitive. Granted, we do have several different buyers on one particular group of animals for sale. Buyers view the animals during the sale, and then a little more digging into the shrink side of things. There's a little more opportunity for shrink just because those animals are moving quite a bit through the facilities, and then coming back to farms or going to slaughterhouses. No minimum number of head is required to bring them to auctions, and similar on the dealer direct side. Now, covering the contract side of things, one of the good things about contracts is you can price something that's coming due in 18 months, 2 months, wherever that might fall. That way you can mitigate some price risk from the get-go. Markets are up and down, and contracts kind of help you gain a handle on that. There are premiums and discounts based on your grade and yield, which is a benefit for producers seeing some type of feedback on the carcass info. That's going to help you kind of tweak your own operations, increase, reduce, whatever you need to do on the feed side or the production side. I think that's about it as detailed I'm going to get at the moment, but now, going back to that main point, commercial versus non-traditional, on the left hand, you'll see kind of the main points of what a commercial setting or a commercial product is. Something that's kind of standardized throughout all markets. It's going to be a commodity price. There's really not too big of a difference in what it is. Larger volume, so they're going to handle more pounds just because of the fact that they're more consistent. They are able to do that. And then when you compare that with the non-traditional side, It's a little bit more custom product. Is added value to that product at times. Not necessarily too consistent. There are differences based on your group that you're targeting, or even within that group, that market might be different in New York versus in Chicago, but they originate from the same spot. So it's a little bit more, you got to know more background as far as what they are. And they've got their own kind of niches within that. So again, those terms that we alluded to, halal and kosher, that would fit in that type of a setting. So here we've got a slide kind of boiling it down to what feeder markets are within commercial markets. Now, these are going to be fairly relaxed numbers. Just for education purposes, I kind of made the weights where they are based on demand. Primary demand, it might change based on what you have specifically. So just want everyone to know that from the get-go. Your feeder cattle in a commercial setting are going to be around that 350 to 500 most desirable weight. Feeder cattle can be up to 1,000 pounds. Feeder lambs, 80 to 110 pounds. And these lambs are typically going to be wanted on the buyer side to be coming from a feedlot setting or going into a feedlot setting. So that means something that's kind of already accustomed to taking in feed that's in good condition, in good order and uniformity. With uniformity is fairly important to these guys that are buying, especially larger quantities. Guys hear me all right?
Yeah, you're freezing up
Hope
just a little
so.
bit. Yeah, can you hear me now, Abdullah? Hello?
I am.
Yeah, there's a little delay.
Hello. Okay.
Okay, that sounds
Not sure
better.
if maybe I should turn my video off. Maybe that's better. So
Yeah.
it's going to be a little bit more unique because these guys will be selling down the road in a group setting. Go ahead.
Okay.
On the finish side, similar as far as what's wanted on the packing side of it. They're looking for a consistent product. So they want something that's good quality, whether that be, we've got several different types of product from choice, select, in prime being the top. So packers are going to take that product and then sell it out. So they want something that's kind of in the same ballpark as consistency as you can get. Obviously, they've got several different spots to put that product into. So they're able to take that big volume and divide it up into separate groups. On the cull market side of things, mostly this product is going to be ground, depending on what it is. There's several different avenues it might go. Typically, it's going to be something that's ground in a fast food setting or an institution setting, something that's further processed to make ready foods. For the cattle side specifically, and then on the sheep side, there's instances of shipping outside of the U.S. To markets that might utilize it in their own countries, as well as some of the Caribbean cruises are using quite a bit of cull meat on those as well. Just a general overview of seasonality of the commercial markets. Higher prices typically going to be in the March timeframe, lower volumes. Once you get a higher volume that fall run, you're going to see somewhat of a decrease, but that holiday season typically likes to keep it stable. And then in the summer season, obviously, we've got May beef month, so that's going to grill up a little business there too. One thing to note on this, I would definitely recommend people that might be looking at this one slide and making decisions is you don't want to completely change what your production is based on what that market might do. You got to first look at what your production is able to do and then look at that market accordingly. So that market might change. You might have other markets that show up, but try to focus on what you can do and where you can market first. Okay, so going to the non-traditional markets, what are these buyers looking for? Everyone's looking for quality, regardless of what you have. One key feature that's a little bit different on this than others is the culture aspect to it. And then the requirements on the certifications, as well as freshness. So there is cultural appropriate foods out there that might be all stamped, all ready to go on the halal and kosher side, but they are not necessarily fresh. So the fresh aspect seems to be a key trigger of a demand on that, especially when your fresh product is seen as superior to that imported product. Cultural taste, weights, there's several different weight categories that might be in demand. So like for lambs, for instance, your most demand is going to be anywhere from that 70 to 90 pound level. Once you go over that, you might get a discount on that specific trade, given what they are. Price is also a key factor. Typically, these buyers in a situation where they're one-on-one, they'll prefer the lower price. There are instances where if you've got a product that's got a stamp on it, they have to buy that stamped product, so they're going to pay a little more premium versus buying something that's sitting on the shelf without a stamp. And when I do say stamp, that comes down to the method of slaughter. There's two main types, halal and kosher, which we can go over in the next few slides. I just want to check in to see if you guys are hearing me all right.
Yeah, it sounds much better now. We've lost the stutter. Yeah. Next slide.
Yep. Now, briefly going over the weights here, there's going to be a bit of a difference. Again, this is majority versus what's actually out there. So fed cattle, you're going to have 800 to 1,200 pounds. Lambs and goats, 60 to 90 or so, and being fleshy. That's key on lambs and goats. 40 to 60 would be your demand during Easter. That's your milk feds. Who's buying? Everyone's participating in some degree on that, whether that be other producers, packers, dealers. Dealers do come into play significantly more on the ethnic side, just given the fact that there's several different markets within the ethnic trade. And when you're buying in larger volumes from these larger producers from out west, those dealers come into play where they can kind of sort out what's going where, and even on the small producer side. So they're able to take smaller loads and create larger loads that might fit operations a little better. Being a producer a little distant from that from the city level, it might be a little bit difficult for creating connections, and dealers kind of play that part in creating that relationship. we kind of went over this on the price side. The one thing that we got to note here is those lambs that are being traded, typically those are going to sell by the head. And that's the main reason for that 60 to 90 pound level is a person that's going into a packing house or I should say butcher house might be buying one full carcass. And it's definitely easier to spend money when it's a 100-pound carcass versus when it's a 150 pound. So, or I should say live animal that's 100 pounds versus 150 pounds. So the dollars per family available and the requirement on the carcass side or desirability, I should say, is fairly key because the people that are buying those carcasses might have significance on they want to use the head, they want to use everything from the head to the tail to the hooves. So they want to see all those parts fit in, and the only way they can do that is buying by the head and having it processed to their liking. This would be a little bit general overview again. This slide is really boiling everything down to specifics, something that I don't really like to do, but for educational purposes, you might call this a little bit too biased, but this is something that I deal with. Your main buyers for specific products. Mexican demand typically is going to be for medium ewes. There are instances where they are buying smooth ewes on that too. The Native American groups, they prefer smooth groups, smooth ewes, and that's just what they're accustomed to. Your Middle Eastern or North African medium to smooth ewes on the cull market. Again, that price is going to be significant, especially on the cull market, given the fact of what they are, and then freshness, and then also, like I mentioned on the previous slide, selling by the head is still going to be considered. Okay, so what is halal? Everyone is kind of putting that word out there, but in order to kind of understand what it really is, I feel we got to go over that specifically. So the word halal itself, it's Arabic for meaning permissible. So all split-hooved ruminants, except for hogs, are considered halal in their live form. So a cow walking down the street or in a field, that's a halal animal. In order for it to remain halal in its dead form or flesh form, it needs to go under a procedure that's in some cultures, that procedure is called zabiha. Zabiha halal is a process in which a slaughterman must be of faith, so it has to be of either a Jew, Christian, or Muslim that is performing the process. Preferably, it will be a Muslim slaughterman and slaughters in God's name and bleeds out the animal with a sharp knife. And that entails cutting the two jugulars, esophagus, and windpipe. That's now that animal, once it bleeds out, is considered halal. So again, the book, the Quran says, if it's a person of the book that abides by his own religious text and he performs that slaughter, that animal is considered halal. Now, when you boil it down a little bit further into culture, if you ask a Muslim, oh, will you buy something that a Christian processes? They might say, oh, maybe. But they will prefer a Muslim to do it. And that's just because culture dictates that. The fact of the book says that if you are a practicing Christian and you are a practicing Jew, Muslims are able to eat that product. Again, just to reiterate the fact that majority of lambs that are harvested on the commercial side of things and even on the ethnic side of things are harvested halal in the US. Some of those facilities are not putting that label on the retail product because they think, or there might be other reasons, but that the actual process that is occurring is the halal process. There's reasons why it's being done that way. There's reasons why it's not being labeled. But just for education, that's how most lambs are being harvested. And even some beef plants are harvesting in halal fashion. There are the certification side of things on that is very privatized. So it's not a government organization that's going out and certifying plants as halal or as kosher. It's strictly a private entity that goes out and certifies these places. Sometimes that entity might provide that slaughterman. Sometimes it might just certify the facility. So kosher, some similarities, some differences. Kosher means fit or proper. All split hoof animals, except for hogs, are considered kosher. The slaughterman must have rabbinical authority, so that's a little different. You need to have authority in the halal side of thing. You don't have to have specific authority or certification to do the process. You just have to be an abiding person of faith. The similarity in kosher, slaughter in God's name, bleed out with a sharp blade. And the one key difference here is you have to have a nick-free knife before and after the harvest. So if you are processing and you do nick the knife, that animal has to end up on the commercial trade and cannot be considered kosher. Legs must be deveined. We typically don't do that here in the US. We typically just move those legs into the commercial trade just because the processing is a bit difficult to get that done. Again, this is also private. Certifying agencies that dictate what is kosher and what is not. I guess that's all I've got for that slide. The main holiday that you might hear of is Eid al-Adha. That was about a week ago, last Monday, I believe. So what that holiday is on the sheep and goat side and even cattle side, it's fairly significant. And kind of going back on, giving you a general idea of what that holiday is sacrificing an animal. So one animal would be equivalent of a lamb or goat, or 1/7 beef. And taking that animal and giving a third to charity, a third to family and friends, and a third to self. So that holiday occurs once a year. It rotates about 11 days or so, going backwards every year because it's dependent on the lunar calendar. The preference in that holiday is going to be for intact males without physical imperfection. There's several background that goes into play I won't go over today. They prefer something that's over the age of 1, but here that's a little bit different in America, where we've got weights that might surpass the year 1 in home country within 6 months in the US. So that kind of is a little bit gray area for some folks. They might take something that's 6 months that might be 120 pounds. Versus something over in home country might be a year old and barely 80 pounds. So they will take what is often available. Even if they won't find a ram lamb, they'll take something that's a ewe or a wether. But the preference is always going to be for an intact male without physical imperfection. So again, that holiday occurs once a year, just passed it last week. a lot of producers might ask, oh, how do I service this specific holiday? There's sale days within Equity, but then also some producers like to offer that on-farm facilities or whatever it might be. Jeff might want to chime in on the legality of all that later on, but there are more possibilities other than on-farm. There's processors that are buying even direct on that specific holiday. And that's the ethnic trade isn't necessarily only limited to holidays. It's more now steady throughout the year. It used to be the case where it kind of spiked only on holidays. We're seeing significant demand throughout the year now. It's kind of stable just because of the population going up and the demand overall is going up as well. These are all the different holidays. If you wanted to, you can go on to American Land Board's website. I don't have the link with me here, but you can see all the different types of holidays on the ethnic side that are listed there with the dates going out to 2026. Again, those are a little similar, some weights that are available that are preferred, but again, there's differences within that. Those are going to be your main types that buyers are looking for. I believe that's all I've got for you today. I'll be open to questions later on, unless I'm missing my last slide or something.
There you go, a little summary.
Yeah, so I guess one thing that I didn't allude to this earlier, you got to first understand your own production system, right? And there's several different markets out there, which is a good thing to get educated on every market that might exist around you. But number one thing that you guys as producers need to do is understand what can you produce in your capacity. Once you figure that specific part out, there's the sky's the limit. And if you dedicate your production style to one holiday or two holidays, then you're going to limit your marketability in different avenues. So keep an open mind when you are producing, which several of you are doing, which is a great thing. Wisconsin has a very abundant amount of different types of livestock, different types of production settings. So we're more robust than other agricultural states. Another thing to add to that is keep developing networks, create a plan, and then not only create a plan, but just take action. Utilize those resources. We've got several different speakers here today that are very resourceful, and feel free to ask any questions. Everyone that I've dealt with in the industry is significantly helpful and willing to answer any questions you might have. With that, thank you. I'll be open to questions just like everyone else now.
All right, thank you so much, Abdullah. There's a ton of information there, and I wanted to also, and I will put this information in the chat. If anybody's interested in keeping this conversation going too, I just want to recommend everybody check out the Ag Solidarity Network. It's social networking in a very regional fashion with specific groups, and there are groups for farmer mental health, there are groups for herbs and flowers, there are groups for livestock producers, and so I'd love to see us all continue our conversation in that venue, and I'm gonna throw that link in the chat anytime now. So we could just wait a minute, and anybody who's got a question, you can either throw it in the chat or just shout it out. we've got our first question is, what is a smooth ewe? Abdullah, do you want to explain that classification?
Sure. So smooth ewe would be something that's got good enough cover on top, something that's in other term is fat, similar to what fat cattle might be. On a ewe would be a ewe itself is a female sheep that's has lambed once. That in very good condition would be, or over condition would be considered smooth.
Good question. Also, Alejandra's asking, how much does a halal processed lamb cost versus a conventionally processed lamb?
So there's, again, it's going to be a bit different depending on what you're comparing to. Typically, your commercial lambs are going to be boned out. They're going to have a little bit more steps involved in creating that product. So for the most part, that commercial lamb typically costs a little more on the selling side, and that's due in part with several different gears that turn. But on the live side, I will say that lambs that weigh anywhere from 60 to 90 will typically average more per pound than lambs that might be set up for that commercial setting, being 120 to 160 pounds. That lamb itself, after being processed, the reason for it being a little bit cheaper in some instances will be because some groups prefer to have bone-in lamb, and when you are selling bone-in lamb by the pound, it's going to be a little bit more cheaper because you are selling bone, and that's little desirable in some cultures. Versus when you're looking at a commercial product, it's not going to have any bone in it. It's going to be all trimmed out. It's going to be sold by the cut, not necessarily as a carcass itself. So it's missing a lot of weight itself. So when you compare it, it might be anywhere from, the difference might be a bit. I don't want to put out numbers specifically because it really depends on what type of animal you're comparing with each other.
Markets change as well. So it can depend and fluctuate a little bit. But Abdullah, so during some holidays, some of those lighter lambs, people want to take delivery or want to purchase a whole carcass, correct? Versus having the processor
Yes.
go through the labor of deboning and cutting it into parts. Okay.
Correct.
I thought that was the case, but I wanted to be sure.
Yeah, they do prefer going, if they have the option, they'll prefer doing it themselves. And there are options out there, especially in metropolitan areas. So closest to us being Chicago, where there's lamb in a box, especially during Eid season, which just passed. And that can be anywhere from $350 to $550 a box. And that's a lamb that might weigh, for general purposes, 80 pounds. So you do the math, you could figure that ballpark out. Those boxes that I know are trading $350 to $500, and it's about an 80-pound lamb. And you do get it all back, and you do the third yourself. But if you wanted to compare that to a commercial lamb weighing 80 pounds, it's going to depend on where you're pricing everything. But that instant specifically might be a little bit more catered or higher on the box than a lamb.
I see that Thelma Heidel Baker has her hand up. Thelma, did you want to shout out a question?
Yeah, my question is, I have some different farmers that I've worked with, and the question of understanding, I really appreciate the discussion on like the dates and times of the year when different, weight categories and things with the sheep and goats are kind of desired. But another question that comes up is knowing which market, where do you send your animals to? For example, whether it's, for the ethnic markets that are close to Chicago or organic markets, like where, when, is there a place I can send them to where there's like a list of knowing like this place, like if we're like down in Watertown on this day, you send them, you can bring animals there, you'll get a better price than you will somewhere else. And I realize we're talking for the whole state of Wisconsin, so I don't want to expand. I'm in southeast Wisconsin, but just like where can I send them, or how can I get that information to share with these people that are interested in finding out exactly where to go?
So there are, as far as finding auction facilities, they do special sales for special holidays. As far as finding packers, they're going to be looking for what they're looking about a month in advance. That's typically when they're booking up accounts. When do you do that? The one thing I did mention is American Land Board does have a schedule posted on their website, or a calendar that's got dates, and utilizing those resources. If you wanted to go direct, Jeff had that link for processors that are available. I don't know if someone's got a list specifically dedicated to halal. On the direct side of things, we're kind of limited in Wisconsin having halal facilities. I do know one spot specifically was doing a custom that someone else was coming in to do halal. There was also Strauss that was doing some degree of halal, but they ended up kind of getting out of it. Wisconsin itself, there's quite a few producers servicing that, but there's not necessarily too many kill plants. I might be wrong with that. If someone else has more info on it, go ahead.
No, I think you're right, Abdullah, that we don't have, or I don't know of a good list of places to go if you're a direct marketer or want to participate in LFPA that does halal slaughtering. But that's something that we're working on. I know at the Department of Agriculture to try to come up with that list. And I think that Abdullah won't say it because he's wearing the equity hat today. But to the question of where do you go with your lambs, if you're talking about live lambs and goats, develop a relationship with your market manager at an auction market. Be comfortable calling them and asking them, is the holiday starting to peak yet? Is there a demand for lambs? They'll be really, really honest with you about how many buyers they're expecting to be there for different classes of lambs. And if you represent your livestock over the phone correctly, so that they can kind of picture in their head what that is, or what those sheep and goats look like, it'll pay dividends to have that relationship and hopefully capture a higher price when you're talking live animals. And I think Sarah has had her hand up. I'm sorry, Sarah, I was rambling, and you've had your hand up for a while.
That's okay. I can be very patient. Hello. Hey, Abdullah, or maybe there's other folks too. I'm wondering if you think that there are any sort of tipping points in the number of animals that a farmer might have to make it sort of worth their while to go to an equity or an auction barn. Like, is it, if you only had 5, is that really not worth it? Do you need to be moving like 20 at a time to sort of overcome the transport costs and hassle? Is there any rule of thumb on that?
All answers, it's going to depend on what you have, but the one thing that's fairly good on the ethnic trade is they're able to utilize anything from 1 head to 1,000 head. And Wisconsin being what we have as far as hobby farms, They've got several different options on the plate when they're coming to these facilities, and the ethnic groups that prefer the billy goats can get the billy goats. The guys that want the ewes, they can get those. The lambs, they can get those. But even those packers that do harvest ethnically, they're wanting use five goats, a mixture, just because their facilities or their demand on their site is going to be a mixture as well. So I wouldn't say there's necessarily a requirement of you need 10 head to bring them. I'd say anything you do bring is going to be utilized to the best degree it can. The one thing that I guess I could say is having something that's a little more sizable might be more competitive in the ring, just because of that uniformity side of things, that might come into play from the commercial bidding as well.
Yeah, we had another question in the chat. Can a halal or kosher butcher slaughter on a farm, or does it have to be at a facility?
You want me to take that, Abdullah? Yep. So Kristen C had two questions, so I'll try to answer them both. So halal or kosher can be done on the farm by a mobile unit, as long as the rest of everything that Abdullah talked about needs to happen, whether it's on the farm with a mobile unit or at an establishment. So that would need to happen. Now, Abdullah alluded to it a little bit earlier, and we'll kind of tackle this question as well. If somebody showed up at Stephanie's farm and said, I want to buy a goat and I want to slaughter it right here on your farm and take everything with me, is that legal? Can Stephanie do that? The way that rule has been enforced or looked at has changed, and COVID was one of the things that changed the outlook on that, if you will, for lack of a better word. So Stephanie could absolutely sell a goat, has to be live by the head. The price has to be agreed on. And whoever that person is, or group of people, if she trusts them, they could harvest that animal on the farm. Stephanie can't help. She can provide some equipment. Stephanie can't help. None of her employees can help. Nobody in her family can help. She would only really get in trouble if she's providing the service. But if the people that are buying that goat do it themselves, I know it sounds kind of crazy, but if they're providing providing all the labor themselves and physically doing the work, she could sell one goat, two goats by the head. And Kristen, you're right. There's butcher shops are booking out to 2026 now. Most of them are. We are seeing some holes in some scheduling with cancellations and things like that. For the first time in at least 7 or 8 years, even prior to COVID, I've had butcher shops calling me saying, we've got availability, you can send people our way. So hopefully some of those are in your area. So if you want to reach out to me, hopefully I can find somebody that can get you in before 2026.
We had, is someone,
Go ahead.
I can go ahead. Yep. How to get started in LFPA. Is it a matter of waiting to apply for next year? So currently, we don't know if there will be additional funding next year. So the LFPA program is supposed to end June 2025. And right now we don't foresee any additional funding. So it would be contracts just for this year. that being said, we do have our website in which we have different resources and additional resources that we can share. So yeah, as of right now, no additional funding, but we will obviously keep everyone posted, and you can check out our website. I hope that helped.
Just waiting, looking to see if we missed anything in the chat. Great.
Yeah. One other thing, not to put Forrest on the spot, but Forrest, if you just wanted to mention maybe like some upcoming events, we have our fall farmer gathering. So if you're cool with that, and we pretty good at that.
Certainly. Hi, everybody. My name is Forrest Humphrey. I work on the LFPA program as well. I do some of our network development activities, and we have got some great events coming up. Thank you so much for being part of this one. Yeah, we have a, let me get my event page here. If I can tell you what all of them are. We've got some on-farm events coming up through Marbleseed. There is nothing next month. We have some in August, and we're in August, and a couple in September. Those are really good peer-to-peer learning opportunities. We've got local food system calls that happen on the first Wednesday of every month from 3 to 4. We have our Wisconsin Farmers Union Summer Conference. So if you're interested in talking more about meat processing, that's a good place for that. That's on July 18th. And then we have our Fall Farmer Gathering. This will be at the end of the LFPA season. That is on October 18th, and that is going to be at the new Farmers Union building in Chippewa Falls, the Market on River. So I'm really excited for that. I'm going to put a link to our events page in the chat and encourage all of you to stop on by one of our events. And that's about all I got.
Thanks, Forrest. Well, folks, we can stick around a little longer. I just wanted to thank you all, and I wanted to thank everybody that participated in today's event. I hope you learned a lot. I sure did, and I think we've established some great resources too that we can tap into in the future. So stay tuned. Check us out on Ag Solidarity Network, and do definitely look at those Wisconsin Farmers Union events coming to a farm near you.
Sarah, did you have an evaluation link? I think you
I
wanted to share?
do. Oh, thank you for the reminder. I would have forgotten. I thought I put it in a little earlier. I'm going to throw that in, and I will also compile an email with the links that we shared and this evaluation. But it's really important to us that we get feedback on the content of the event and all of the things you'd like to see. And so let me just grab this. There, that link will take you, that's not to all of you. Let's get it to everybody. This link will take you to a simple evaluation of tonight's event. Please let us know what worked for you, what else you'd like to see in the future. and share your thoughts in as much detail as you like. It's really useful. It's really helpful to us. Well, everybody, if everybody's questions are answered, let's enjoy our evening. I look forward to hearing from you all again soon. And thanks one last time for joining us tonight.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Forrest.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.